Man, I love the Christmas season. The decorations, the hot cocoa, being with family and friends, looking at the beautiful snow, even if it's pretty annoying, and of course, watching the Christmas specials and movies that's on. Everyone's got their stuff they watch for the season. You got your Rankin Bass specials, the various cartoon holiday specials from various shows, the 50 Scrooge movies that exist. But what about holiday video games? I know this might be a shock to some, but there aren't that many of them. I mean, sure, you got stuff like Christmas Nights, and there are some games that take place on Christmas, like Batman Arkham Origins. But for the most part, it's usually just maybe a snow-themed level in a game. But if we're talking more about movie licensed games, well, dang. Let me tell ya, sometimes I find it hard to believe some of these movie-based games actually exist and how they would even work as a game. Like Disney's A Christmas Carol, you know, the CG one, the one that gave everyone nightmares. How do you even make a game based off that? Well, they did on the DS. Oh, and by the way, did you know this was developed by Sumo Digital? Like the same Sumo Digital that would do some of the Sonic and Sega racing games and a few of the Little Big Planet games? Yeah, no joke. I would love to look at this game, but unfortunately I couldn't really get it to work. But for today's video, I do have 7 other Christmas movie-based games we can look at. I have never played any of these games before, so I'm going in pretty much blind. I'm usually very optimistic and open-minded, so I want to see if maybe one of these games is at least a hidden gem. But let's not waste any more time and get into it. I hope this was a good decision. So firstly, let's start off with the 3 Grinch video games, all of which are based on the 2000 film with Jim Carrey. Let's look at the console game first, which was published by Konami, yeah, that Konami, and it was developed by Artificial Mind and Movement, or Behavior Interactive as they're known today. It was on the PS1, PC, and Dreamcast, and it was released in late 2000. Of all the games in this video, this is probably the most well-known game, since it has been covered by a few other content creators in the past. Though I usually see the PS1 version be the one that's covered. So I'm going to take a look at the Dreamcast version, since I actually heard people didn't even know a Dreamcast version even existed. So the game follows the movie pretty well for the most part, with some deviations here and there. However, this voice acting...
After I collect the plans that have blown away, I'll feed them to my processor.
...is kind of awful. Like, presentation-wise, it's not very good. These environments look so bland and dull. And yeah, I know the film had a similar dark look to it, but you could have at least livened up the place a bit to make the environments look nice. It looks like the whole town was just abandoned. The models look kinda creepy too. Like, these movie designs don't translate very well to the actual game. Like, look at these kids, they look so creepy. I will say, the music is pretty great stuff. It's really nice, and it's probably my favorite part of the entire game. Like, give this OST a listen when you get the chance, it's really good. So this game is a platformer with some light stealth elements here and there. The controls are okay, although what is this run cycle? It looks ridiculous. If I saw someone running like this in real life, I would have many questions. Basically, you have a bunch of tasks you need to do, and once you complete them, you can move on to the next world. Pretty simple stuff. And how does it all play out? Not gonna lie, this was such a hard game for me to write about, because this game was just so boring. Like, let me just say first off, I do really like this idea. I'm totally down with a game adaptation of The Grinch. There is a lot of potential with it. But all of it was just so uninteresting and just not very fun. I don't really like these missions because 1, they're bland, and 2, it's hard to even know what you're supposed to do half the time. I would spend like 20 minutes in a level just running around trying to figure out what exactly I was supposed to do. Like, for instance, when I got to the mailroom, I thought, okay, you gotta switch to Max and go through the maze and just hit the switch, right? Well, no, you gotta switch back to the Grinch and make it to the room where Max is in, and then once you do, you gotta switch all the mail around, which is fine, but the game leaves no indication you're supposed to be doing this. You also need to find these blueprints to complete a new gadget, and once you get all the blueprints, you can head back to the Grinch's cave and build the gadget, right? Well, yes, but you also need to do this slide puzzle first. Why? Is it really necessary to do this? It literally didn't even need to be here. The gadgets are alright, they're probably the most Grinch-like things in the game. In fact, that's my biggest problem with this game. It just doesn't feel like the Grinch. Like, the Grinch isn't expressive or really very mischievous, and the tone of the game just feels so off. I know the live action film is pretty split with a lot of people, but the Grinch in the film is very expressive, he feels alive, and most importantly, this is how I'd see the Grinch as. And I mean, look at the cover of the game. This perfectly captures the Grinch well. The Grinch in this game feels so stiff and bland. You could replace him with any other generic character and it wouldn't really change much. Honestly, I really didn't get too far with this game. When I got to the second world, I was so bored that I just couldn't bring myself to finish it. I wouldn't say it's an outright awful game. There isn't that much in here that I would say is that bad. Heck, it's not even close to being the worst game in this video. But man, writing about boring games are the worst, because there just isn't that much you can say about them. They're just boring. It's a mediocre game, and I really wouldn't recommend playing it. So let's see what the Game Boy Color version is all about. This version was developed by a team at Konami, it wasn't handled by A2M whatsoever. Let me just say, these cutscenes are pretty nice, and once again the game follows the movie pretty closely. That, and what is with this guy's face? He looks like he's sleeping. But man, someone really liked drawing the Grinch in this game, because wow, like, these look really good, and they capture the Grinch perfectly. How does the 8-bit Game Boy Color game capture the Grinch much better than the big 3D game? In fact, while you're playing the game, there's even a little portrait and the Grinch changes expressions. That's such a cool detail. And well, the game itself actually feels like a game based off the Grinch. It's pretty much Pac-Man with some stealth elements. You gotta grab all the presents while watching out for the who's and dogs. It's pretty simple, but really fun. The music is also really good. It's calming while you're sneaking around, but once an enemy spots you, the music is also fast and frantic. It's great. I honestly don't have much else to say. It's just a fun Pac-Man clone. It's really fun, and I would absolutely recommend finding a copy of this game if you can. Way better than the console version for sure. Now for the DS game, this came out way later in 2007, and it was published by DSi Games. No, not to be confused with the console to DSi, the company DSi, known as Destination Software Inc. And it was developed by Black Lantern Studios. DSi published mostly low-budget games, although they did publish a few GBA Pac-Man games. As for Black Lantern Studios, well, they did do the infamous Elf Bowling 1 and 2 on DS and GBA, but once again, they just did low-budget games. Honestly, I didn't even know this game even existed until I was researching about the previous two games. By the way, yes, I'm using an emulator for this since, at the moment, I still don't have a DS capture card. But how is the DS game, you may ask? Oh, it's trash. Like, what even is this game? After recording this, I literally had no idea what I even played. This feels like an old Flash game I'd play on my computer, and I mean, I kinda was playing this on my computer, but you get my point. Not a DS game you paid money to buy. There barely even is a story, just some text and poof, you're playing the game. All you do is sneak around and steal presents and such. Kinda like the Game Boy Color game, but just not fun at all. But that's pretty much it, and wow, these controls are so bad. The controls are so picky on going up the stairs, stealing the presents feels so delayed, and this music made me so numb. I didn't spend much time with this. This game apparently takes about only under an hour to finish, but I couldn't even stomach more than 20 minutes of it. It was awful. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend this. Play the Game Boy Color version if you want your handheld Grinch game. This, just no. Well, that covers the Grinch games, so let's check out the games based off the Polar Express. And once again, we'll start with the console game, released on the GameCube, PS2, and PC in late 2004. This game was published by THQ and Blue Tongue Entertainment developed this. That's a familiar face for this channel since they're responsible for some certain Nickelodeon games I may have talked about in the past. Anyways, the movie Polar Express is weird, but I still really enjoy it, even if some of the visuals haven't aged that well. And the game follows the movie pretty much exactly the same, with one big difference. There actually is a villain in the form of the Scrooge puppet who in the movie only appeared for a small scene, but here he's the main antagonist. That's cool. I think if you were gonna make a game based off the Polar Express, you did need to add something to the story to have it work as a game. Weird thing though is that the main character, the hero boy, acts nothing like he did in the movie. Like in the movie, he does heroic acts, but he doesn't act like this superhero persona like he does in this game. Like here, look at this comparison.
You didn't lose her ticket. I did. I tried to return it to you, but the wind blew it out of my hand. That girl was depending on me. I'm not going to let her down.
It's even more jarring when they switch between the clips from the movie and the actual in-game cutscenes. Presentation-wise though, it's pretty bad. The voice acting is alright for the most part, but these in-game cutscenes look pretty awful. Animations are stiff, the models are really bad looking, and it's just an ugly looking game. The music is really nice though. It has a lot of chill orchestra music, though I noticed how similar it sounded to another Blue Tongue game, Nicktoons Unite. As it turns out, they were both composed by the same guy. That's pretty cool. But yeah, this soundtrack is pretty good, and once again, it's probably my favorite part of the game. The game itself is really weird. I thought going into this it was some platformer, and it has a few platforming levels, but for the most part the game is just all over the place in what it wants to do. There's tennis, pushing blocks, skiing, a rhythm game, it's all over the place. The controls are okay, so no problems with that, but what is this game trying to be? Is it trying to be a minigame collection, an adventure game? What is this game's goal? It's so unfocused on what it wants to be, and everything that it's trying to do fails pretty hard. The platforming stages are so clunky to navigate, most of the minigames are either bland or just plain awful. This rhythm game especially was downright terrible due to the delay in the button presses. There's like one boss in the entire game. By the way, I love when you beat the boss, the conductor doesn't even comment on the entire part of the train being destroyed. Like, what even? It's also a really short game. It only took me under 2 hours to finish, though it definitely felt a little longer than that. This game blows. I didn't have any fun with it whatsoever. It's an unfocused mess of a game that tries to do everything but succeeds at none. The only redeeming parts of this game is the music, and I do appreciate them reworking the story to fit this game. Oh yeah, I should mention that apparently the PS2 version has iToy support. I don't have that version or an iToy, so I can't really speak on what it entails. There's not even that much info about it, but I guess if you're into iToy type games, then I guess look into it. Otherwise, I don't recommend it, even if you're a big fan of the movie. Now for the Game Boy Advance version. This was developed by Tantalus Media, like the Tantalus Media that did the 2 Zelda remasters and even helped with the Switch port of Sonic Mania. What? Yeah, let that sink in. Anyways, the story is one-to-one the same as the film. It's not really changed or anything like that. The game looks not very good. I know it's typical 3D Game Boy sprites, but man, this game just does not look appealing in the slightest. It all just looks so weird. Maybe on an actual Game Boy Advance screen it looks alright, but still. The music is pretty good still. In fact, I might even like this soundtrack a little more than the console version. But the presentation overall isn't very good. The game is a 2D platformer where you have to find 3 bells in a stage and reach the end to complete it. Now I know at first, at the sound of that, it sounds pretty tedious, but it's really easy to find all the bells. They are really hard to miss. The controls are pretty stiff though. It all feels really clunky to control, especially jumping. Like whenever I jump, it feels so heavy and it almost feels like I'm not jumping correctly. It's really awkward. I do like the idea of using toys as power-ups though. It's a really cool idea that I wish the console version also had. Although whenever he uses the invincibility power-up, it looks like he's going Super Saiyan. I swear I'm not the only one who sees this. The minigames are pretty simple, although I died so many times in this tube minigame. Like, this was the only part of the game that legit gave me a lot of trouble. Otherwise, the game is really easy, but it was also pretty boring. I am glad the game has a better focus than the console version, but this game just feels so generic. It's just a standard platformer, and while yes, I know a lot of other GBA licensed games were pretty standard platformers too, but I've played a good chunk of them that did something to stand out. Polar Express is so basic, and aside from the toys as power-ups, it's not that interesting. I don't care for the levels, the minigames are just whatever, and I just didn't really have fun with it either. I think it's a little better than the console version, but honestly, I think the console version is more interesting for how bizarre it was. This though, is so basic and generic, it's just whatever. I also would not recommend playing this. Again, not the worst, but definitely so forgettable. Now for our last two games, we're looking at two Game Boy Advance games based on two live-action Christmas movies. And we'll start with Elf the movie, the game. Elf is one of my favorite Christmas movies. You really can't go wrong with it. But how do you make a game of it? Like, okay, I've seen some licensed games that I'm surprised even exist, but Elf on Game Boy Advance? How does that even work? Well, it exists, and it was released in late 2004, about 1 year after the film came out. It was published by Crave Entertainment, who you might have seen published a few other licensed games, and it was developed by a studio called Jolly Forward Management Limited. I could not find any info on this company. Only thing I found was this was apparently their only game. Otherwise, I couldn't find anything else on them. Anyways, we start the game and oh, it's a still from the movie, okay. Wait, what? We're just thrown into the game with no context? Yeah, so for cutscenes, they just show a still from the movie with like no text explaining what's going on. Look, I know most people probably watched the movie beforehand, but you could have at least put some text at the bottom of the still to explain what was going on. Instead, just putting the still right here is just confusing and doesn't make any sense. It still follows the story of the movie, but it just presents it terribly. Just a little text at the bottom would have been nice, you know? Something like this would have been great. But that's just one problem because, oh boy. So we have another platformer slash minigame collection. And like the Polar Express, it has absolutely no idea what one wants to be. Well, first, let's start with the platforming, which is awful. These controls are either too slippery or too sluggish. It never feels good to control whatsoever. And these levels are either too short or way, way too long. This iceberg level was so awful. You have to be super precise on jumping, and by the way, the health system is really weird. Every time you get hit, you don't just get hit and continue forward. No, once you get hit, you send all the way back to the checkpoint. Why? This is tedious. No other game I've ever played had something like this. You get hit and just move on. None of this garbage. Also, I'll just say, this game is not appealing in the slightest to look at. Again, maybe it looks better on an actual GBA screen, but look at these sprites, man. Like, these just look so ugly to look at. Like, look at this polar bear. It looks like the polar bear from that one GIF. And the minigames were not fun at all. They were really tedious to do, and most of them went on for what feels like forever. Like, I'm not against games having minigames or trying to do a lot, but it has to be fun. This is not fun. Pressing buttons on an elevator, throwing snowballs really slowly, matching pipes. This isn't fun, this is just monotonous and boring. I didn't even enjoy the music. A lot of it was honestly ear-greeting to listen to. The only two tracks I legit like are the title theme, which is a remix of the movie's theme. Okay, that's actually really cute, not gonna lie. And the last stage's theme, which is basically We Wish You a Merry Christmas. That's always a sweet song. But even then, both of these songs are not original songs to this game. Now, I'm not kidding when I say this, but this might be one of the worst games I've ever played. I didn't like most of these games in this video, but honestly, I didn't hate any of them. Even the Grinch DS game, while I'm really bewildered by it, I didn't hate it, it was just bad. Hate is a really strong word to me. You guys know from my channel, I'm a very optimistic and open-minded person. It's hard for me to say I hate something since it's a really powerful word to me. But Elf, the movie on Game Boy Advance, was a game I legit hated everything about it. Yes, I know there are a ton of really bad licensed games both on the GBA and consoles, but I've equally have played many other solid games on this system. So this game literally has no excuse. When I'm literally begging a game to end, there is a big problem. Stay as far away from this game as possible. It's not even a so bad it's funny game, it's just plain horrible. Now, for the last game we'll be looking at today, and the other Game Boy Advance game, we're looking at Santa Claus 3: The Escape Clause, released in 2006. Yeah, the third Santa Claus movie gets a game, but not the first two. I guess the third movie had a lot of crazy stuff happening at once. I mean, this movie's plot is really chaotic when you really look into it, so I can see how you can make a game off of this. This was published by Buena Vista Games and was developed by First Playable Productions. You may know First Playable Productions best for the DS Ben 10 games, and they would go on to even do Cooking Mama Cookstar. Yeah, that's a pretty big track record. Anyways, the plot of the game follows the movie pretty well, and look at that, stills from the movie with text at the bottom explaining what's going on. That's how you do it. The game is a 2D platformer where you simply just gotta make it to the end. The controls are pretty decent, although double jumping feels really weird. You gotta press the A button really fast to do it. You could also glide and use toys to get past certain obstacles and enemies. Well, unless you're playing as Scott Calvin, where you're instead just throwing snowballs. Let me just say, the graphics are so ridiculous looking. Like, look at Jack Frost and Scott Calvin. They look so silly as 2D sprites. Especially controlling Scott, the animations are so ridiculous. It's pretty funny seeing him double jump and slide like this. I do really like this soundtrack too. It's really nice and it's a pretty great listen. The levels themselves are alright. They all are pretty distinct from each other, although they weren't really anything too special. There are some mini games you do, but thankfully you don't need to beat them to continue from the story, which is great. There are a few bosses you fight, there's this enemy gauntlet you do, and then there's the final fight with Jack Frost, which is something, I guess. I'll be honest, this game is not bad at all. Like, when you really look at it, it's very simple and it doesn't really break any new ground. But at least compared to the other platformers I played for this video, I had some fun playing through it. I don't have any real big problems with this game, it's just a nice game to play. It's not amazing or anything like that, but it's an alright game for what it is. If you could find this game for like $5 and you're a big fan of the Santa Claus movies, then yeah, check this game out, it's decent. So overall, yeah, most of these games were garbage. The only ones I can recommend is the Grinch on Game Boy Color and Santa Claus 3 on the Game Boy Advance. All the other games were either mediocre, bad, or just flat out trash. I will say it was really fun looking at all these games and just discovering these even exist at all, which was a really cool experience. And with that, we conclude my last video of my first year on YouTube. I hope you all enjoyed the start to my channel, and I can't wait to make more stuff next year. It's gonna be really fun. And once again, thank you all so much for the support you've given me. It really means a lot. But if this is your first video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button to see more content. And if you like this video, give it a like. And let me know in the comments below if you've played any of these games before. I'd love to hear your experiences with them. Anyways, I hope you all have a happy holidays and a happy new year. I'll see you all next year. Bye!